Let's spend a little more time talking about concerns around campaign interference and where it might come from and how to detect it, and how concerned Canadians are about interference, misinformation, and social media. Coming up a little later, my conversation with Sam Jeffers, an expert on who's trying to reach voters and why. But ahead of that, my recent discussion with pollster David Coletto from Abacus Data about election priorities and the concerns of Canadians about the role of social media. Talk about in a moment the whole social media piece and how we think that might change some of the conversation in the election campaign. But first, let's talk about priorities and what'll drive people's votes. Start there, and then we'll talk about the social media piece as we get into it. So when you ask people, you know, what are the big issues that might drive your vote? What are you hearing?
Well, when this campaign starts, there's a handful of issues that seem to be getting voters' attention. And so when we ask them what 5 issues are going to be most important to deciding your vote, we get at the top of the list the cost of living at 55%, the only issue in which a majority of the country picks. It's clearly, you know, part of the conversation with the parties as well. Followed by healthcare, access to healthcare at 42%. Climate change and the environment is number 3 at 39%, and taxes rounds out the top 4 at 38%. Other issues that are prominent: the economy, poverty and inequality, housing, immigration and refugee policies, government spending and deficits, and rounding out this, what I call the top tier of issues, is the cost and availability of medicine. So these are the issues that at least 1 out of 4 Canadians say they are going to decide their vote. And in other words, political leaders, please talk about these things.
Right, and not just that, but people talk about these things, voters talk about these things in different groups. That brings us to the, we want to drill down a bit on the social media piece and the role social media might play in this campaign and some concerns around that. We're not going to focus so much in our conversation about the potential for outside interference and so on. Really want to sort of pick your brain on this and your findings on this about how we might see the conversation around some of these big issues unfold during the campaign based on how people use social media, what they think of it, and what they're likely to learn from it. So let's start there. Let's start with the level of trust Canadians place in social media companies, because that's going to be a big deal in terms of policing the conversation and paying attention to who's saying what and what's true and what's not true. What do they say?
Well, I mean, just before I get into that number, I think it's important to note, like, this is not the first election in which we've had social media, but it's maybe the first election in which most Canadians have some form of social media, whether it's
far
Facebook,
more prevalent than we've seen in past campaigns.
right, and more engaged, more part of our lives. And so, as a result, what we see on there can influence, right, our thinking. The thing is, we've got to a point, though, where most Canadians tell us in the surveys that we've done on this that they don't trust the social media companies themselves to provide reliable and truthful information about politics. 71% say they do not trust those companies. And so this comes out of, no doubt, you know, all of the fallout from the 2016 U.S. presidential election, Brexit, Cambridge Analytica, the use of our data to try to kind of manipulate us in many ways, as well as, I think, a sense that, you know, some of these social media companies haven't gone far enough or don't have the ability, actually, to police and control what information shared on them. So that's the negative side. The plus side is, I think, is if 71% of Canadians don't trust these companies or what they see on social media, maybe their filter is going to be a little bit stronger.
Yeah, I was going to say these might not, this number might not be a number that's makes us entirely pessimistic. It might lead us to think, well, if their awareness is this heightened, they're better judges of what to watch for, right?
Yeah, if 100% or 71% of Canadians said I trust social media companies and we know what we do about some of the content on there, that would be far more worrying, I think.
And then you drill down to find out some information to look at the people followed on social media and how they're viewed. What did you find?
And that's the difference. So the first question was about social media companies. Now we asked about, okay, what about the people you follow? You choose to follow these people, and only 41% say they're confident that the information they provide or share about politics is truthful and reliable. So again, while this is an indication that people recognize not everything they see online is real or necessarily accurate, some people do, most people don't. And again, I think points to the fact that I think Canadians are increasingly aware of what they're seeing, and I suspect are going to be a little more discerning, hopefully, during this campaign.
Yeah, and we've seen some surveys, some studies leading up to the the launch of the campaign that suggests, in fact, the more people get information from social media, the more likely it is they are to be misinformed about some of the big issues, right? I mean, that's a bit of a concern, but again, speaks to this whole notion of know what the information is you're getting, know where it comes from, and those various things.
And I think social media, some of the other research we do, particularly among younger Canadians who don't really, watch a whole lot of TV or listen to radio or read newspapers anymore, there's a tendency to become isolated from what's going on. So if you're really only interested in hockey, let's say, you can isolate yourself by picking who you follow on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, and only get content about that, and may not even know, I hope that's not the case, may not even know elections going on, right? If you leave your home, you'll notice because there's lawn signs everywhere. Right. But otherwise, there's a real chance that isolation happens, which allows some people to be more easily manipulated because you know exactly how to reach them and what they're interested in.
This next one is an ongoing debate we have as a society, right? Whether social media and the prevalence of it these days is good or bad for our democracy. What are people in your survey saying?
Well, we find that a majority actually say, the political commentary on social media, generally speaking, hurts more than it helps, right? It's not saying all commentary, all information on social media is bad, but when we ask people on balance, do you think it's a good or bad thing for democracy? Most say it's not. And again, there's some consistency, at least in what Canadians are telling us, but as a reflection that, and I think a call from a public policy angle that Canadians first recognize there's potentially a problem, they might be more discerning, but that doesn't eliminate the fact that it's still going to happen during this campaign.
All right, so as the campaign continues, they're going to be bombarded with all kinds of information on social media. So what do you find when you raise the issue of who they have confidence in to provide them with information they can trust about politics?
Well, the good news
and presumably
for journalists like you and organizations like CPAC is when we compare Canadian news organizations to even government departments, elected officials, or people you follow on social media, you win out on confident that it's reliable and truthful. 69% of Canadians feel confident in Canadian news organizations to give them reliable and accurate and truthful information. Now, 31% who don't feel that way is still, I think, high, but compared to even, think that government departments and agencies, right? 51% are confident, 42% on elected officials, and then people I follow on social media at 41%. So all of this points to me, obviously Canadians recognize the news media, journalists has a role still to play and is a reliable source for that. On the flip side, it shows we are living in a world where I think voters and Canadians more generally are very suspicious about the quality of the information that's out there, and trust is at a minimum to some extent. And so that means, I think, voters are going to be really skeptical about claims that are made. It's sometimes harder if you're a political party or a candidate to persuade somebody when they're going to maybe instantly discount what you say. And that means, in terms of quality of democracy, it's harder for us to have adult conversations about public policy when I implicitly not going to believe anything that comes out of your mouth, even if you're telling me the truth, right? And that's not the case. But those kind of conversations, I think, increasingly happen in our more polarized society today.
All right, lots to watch for in that. David Coletto, as always, thanks.
Thanks, Peter.